I think he might be looking for his microphone. That happens to me all the time.
Oh, okay.
Hello. Testing. 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 Okay. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I don't know what was going on with the mic issues there. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good, man.
Pretty
good
good.
Weekend. How about yourself, dude?
Okay. I don't really know either of your positions too much. Sour just messaged me and asked if I wanted to chat with someone, so I'm like, okay, sure. So I guess so I can go first. So I'm an agnostic. I think that given the arguments that currently exist, one can rationally be a theist and rationally be an atheist. And I just like engaging with the arguments on either side and like still deciding where I stand on it. So that's my position.
Oh, respect, man, dude. Respect. Like that's good because I've met a lot of people where just earlier today someone messaged me where it's like they're atheists, but they would be like, there's not an X amount of evidence that will make me believe in God. I'm like,
yeah, I think that's
okay. That sounds very arrogant and very unintellectual with yourself. Like that's very dishonest with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a little silly. I think the way to do it is kind of to like look at the evidence and arguments that currently exist and kind of just like weigh up the probabilities. So if like the probabilities shift to one side over the other, then you should believe
definitely.
that.
There's each category of philosophical, your experience, the science, every bullet point matters in these kind of conversations. Like if one contradicts the other one, you'd be like, let me reevaluate what I'm believing in right now. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. What's your what's your like position? Like, or I know you're a theist, but like, what type of theist?
So I'm a Baptist. I'd rather just say, so I go to Baptist, right? I'd rather just say I'm just a follower of Christ because people always the misconception of like, oh, you're religious. And I'm just like, kind of, but it's like religion has been more or less of following a group of people rather than what the person originally taught in the original documents. And it's always good to be with a community, to help you grow with your faith and others around you. But to put your faith in either baptism, Christianity, Catholicism, whatever, I think you'd be a fool.
Sure.
You do not put your faith in the religion itself. You put your faith on what it was based upon and what it was originally written. Because throughout history, religion has been shown to do some horrible things. Horrible things. It has provoked the Salem witch trials. It has the Spanish Inquisition. It had made slavery in the United States, and it had the Crusades.
Yeah, I'm not going to be one to like use the argument of like, Christianity's done horrible things, because like the question I'm interested in is is it true or not, and regardless of whether horrible things have been done in its name isn't going to affect whether it's true or not.
Right, that's just people corrupting a message and showing that they're being very hypocrites. And of course, there's the argument of like, but people are like, oh, the Crusades, why they do that? I'm like, well, during on the time areas of the Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades, and the Salem witch trials, a lot of people could agree.
The way that I see that,
they had to rely on other people to vocally tell them what it's saying.
The way I see that
now,
whole thing
that's where it's gonna get a little fucky. You know what I'm saying?
there's
like
gonna be
someone could be like,
yeah.
oh, it says there to beat women, even though it doesn't. You know what I mean?
So the way I see this, there's going to be like two hypotheses. There's going to be like the hypothesis that Christianity is true, the hypothesis that Christianity is not true. And on either one of those hypotheses, the Crusades could happen. So I'm not going to see that as evidence for or against Christianity.
Right, and I would argue that's just human arrogance and hypocrisy.
So if, I guess I can just ask you about specific doctrines. If you don't want to say like you're Arminianist, Calvinist, Reformed, like I can just ask you like specific. So like, okay, how do you feel about like divine predestination?
Should I act like I know what that is, or should
I can tell you that's the idea
Okay.
that like our actions aren't freely willed, that God kind of determines whether or not we're going to go to heaven or not before we're even born, like that whole thing.
So yeah, okay. So for this, so God is an eternal being. There is no beginning or end with him. He always was. He always was. Therefore, he always knows. He is outside of this realm that we have a construct of our own time, because he is literally almost, in a sense, in a different dimension. If you want to put it that way.
Can I stop you just to get clarification on something, like as we go? Cause
Sure thing.
So what you said, two things. You said God is like an eternal being. He's always existed and always will exist. And you also sounded like you said God's outside of time. And I'm just not sure which one of those two it is.
I mean, it's all. You wouldn't be a god if you were stuck in a time you had a beginning or end, because if it would contradict of being a god, wouldn't it?
Well, if you're
start
outside of time, then temporal notions like beginning and end aren't going to apply to you. But to say that somebody lived eternally in the past, right, that is referring to time. So, like, there's two theories in Christian thought. There's one that God exists within time, but eternally past and eternally present. And then there's one notion where God just doesn't exist in respect to time at all. You can't apply things like past eternal or present eternal. He's just outside of those things. Like, I was just curious which one of those you were going with.
So I'm just going with what the Bible literally says in many chapters, like in Peter and Leviticus and Deuteronomy and so on and so on.
Okay.
For me, like, it is a very concept to grasp, because this is something that we are not used to. There is no measurement that we can do that doesn't involve time. You know what I mean? Like, we know that gravity has an effect on time. Like, time is stretchable and malleable. They can never go back, you know? So with that, us being taught for this our whole lives, to hear something so out of reach, to say, you know, that a God that always was and has been, has no beginning or end, and doesn't abide by our time, you know, also doesn't make sense to me either. I'll admit that. But then if it did abide to our time, and it did have a beginning and end, then it would contradict literally the definition of a God. So there would be a major contradiction within the two. It's either this or it's either that. But if it's the other one, then he's not a God. You see what I'm saying?
What was the contradiction with the second one there?
Because, okay, a God is something that isn't abided by the rules of living things, right?
Well, time's not going to be a rule of living things, so that's fine. That doesn't contradict the definition.
And some would also say time is a social construct.
Yeah, people say that, but I don't take that view. I think that, like, time is actually real. Like, there's a metaphysical dimension of time through which things are ordered in. I don't subscribe to the idea that, like, it's just a measurement of change and that's all.
It could be. I mean, it's not measurable besides, you know, looking at a watch, but, like, you can't put it in a test tube.
What I'm saying is that if we order specific events and things in time, like, we're actually are ordering these things along an axis, and that's what we're calling time, but it is a real thing. That's my position on it.
Yeah, time is definitely a real thing. That's why some people would argue. That's why I said some people. I didn't say I would. I said some people would argue that it's a social construct, even though it's like, even if all humans didn't exist, all minds didn't exist, if an apple fell off the tree, it would still rot, even though there's no mind to determine that it was time.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much my stance. And you had like a two-part of a question.
Yeah, so I guess then for do you think that do you know, I guess I'll ask this first. Do you know what libertarian free will is in, like, the philosophical literature? If not, I can break it down.
I feel like that's like the illusion of free will. I think I've heard something like that before.
Well, not exactly. So libertarian free will is the idea that is, like, kind of an idea of absolute free will. It means that, like, for any action that we take, it was possible that we could have done something different instead. That's the libertarian free will.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's very possible.
Okay.
Like, there's an instance where I could have backed out of this call and been a wuss about it, you know? Like, could have been... But there's no evidence to support of the multiverse theory. Like, of course, even Hawking always brought up and said, yeah, that's entirely possible. But we have no literal evidence of it. It's a good theory. It's a good thought to think, yeah, there could be, like, a tree branch of different events happening throughout the cosmos of space-time. But we have nothing to support it.
Well, yeah, when we talk about, like, something else possibly could have happened, I'm not saying there's a universe in which that did happen. I'm just saying there's a possible world in which that happened, which is a little bit of a different thing, because I'm not saying that possible worlds are real or anything.
Okay.
So, yeah, it sounds like because you would want to be able to say, right, that, like, people can freely choose to follow God or not follow him. Like, that they actually have the ability to do that, right? So I would think.
Oh, yeah, people have the ability to do good or evil. I could literally have the ability to go up to some homeless dude and kick him, or I can literally choose to give him money to pay for his next meal. Okay. I can choose with my free will what to do with it. I can exercise my free will.
Okay, so then you would believe in libertarian free will. That's what that is.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, okay.
I'm not really good with the definitions, like... You're doing a good job, by the way. Like, you seem very well educated, and I respect that.
Yeah, I do like philosophy of religion as a hobby. It's been a big passion of mine for the last few months.
Okay. Yeah, that's smart. Like, that's what I did. So, like, actually, it was about a year and a half ago, I was dwindling in my faith. I was just kind of living what I wanted to live up until I watched this video, and it made me think about things like, why do we believe what we believe? What is the evidence of that? You know, what is the counter evidence? And then what is the philosophical evidence? What is the counter philosophical evidence? And it made me want to dig into it way more. I was like, okay, you know what? I want to know, is this true or not? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And for over a year now, I've been at least two times a week. I would spend time researching, looking up sources, getting the rationality of the whole situation. Is the Bible accurate? You know, are there contradictions within the text? Started reading it a little bit more. Started analyzing through historic reliability of different plot points of how do I determine what would be considered a historic reliable document, you know? And boy, when I came to that conclusion, the Bible flew with flying colors, and that's when I started taking my faith seriously, and then experiences happened, and then I have completely changed my way of living my life.
Okay. And then the very last question I have about your point about your stuff is, I'm guessing you said you're Baptist, so I'm guessing it's reasonable to assume that you believe in the tri-omni God, right? So,
the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
No, that's the triune. Tri-omni is all good, all powerful, all knowing.
I believe in that, but at the same time, when you notice, if God created beings with a free will, that limits his power. Because not only he's not, you know, omnipotent and can control all, even though he still can, but he chooses to limit his power based upon our free will. And whether we want him in our lives or not, either he interacts with us or he doesn't, depending on our stance of whether we want him in our life or not.
Well,
that does limit his power.
So we can get into that part. Because I haven't even. All I was asking is just, do you believe in the tri-omni God? It sounds like you're already going into, like, trying to defend the problem of evil. We haven't quite got there yet.
I know.
Well, we can get there, but I wanted to see if you wanted to, like, if you want to be the first one. Like, I was just getting your position so that I know what you believe, and I have a good idea of that now. If you wanna, I can either go first and, like, I guess give some arguments against some of the positions you have, or if you would like to go first, you can give me some arguments, and I can give you some responses.
Oh, by the way, what's your name?
Michael.
Hi, Michael and Brandon. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
But yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, we can talk about that. So the classic problem, like if God is all good, all knowing, all powerful, why is there evil in the world? You said that like so God limits his power by creating free creatures because he sees creatures being able to have freedom and choose to have a relationship with him as like a greater good, right? Is an even greater good than if he had just made it so that everybody like does good things, right? That's basically your response to that problem. Is that fair?
Right. I agree, because if you create something, let's say, for example, if I were to create a robot and made it love me, would you argue that's true love or not?
That's going to depend on what you mean by love. But
is that the free will of love? Like
if
legit?
You make it,
is that
if you,
the
if
actual
you, if you
definition
make
of
it
love?
to only be able to love you, as probably you wouldn't feel very loved. Sure. I mean, yeah, I'll give you that.
I think you're catching what I'm flying.
I'm very familiar with the response you're giving. But
yeah, if
I have issues with
like
it.
the same thing. If I were to, let's say you met this wonderful, beautiful young lady, and you guys started to hit it off for months, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden your dad comes to you and says, "Hey, I was paying her about $500 a week for her to be with you." How would you feel about that? Like,
yeah, no,
you would realize that girl never really loved you. Like that would have been, her love was not literal love. So in order for us to have a real relationship, an actual value of love, we must have a free will in order for that to exist.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he's just getting his ego stroked if he created us without a free will.
Right. So I do have an issue with this, and this is basically the issue. So given it, and I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure when you say God's all powerful. I haven't tried to get a specific definition of all powerful from you. But I'm going to assume that you hold, like, the standard theist conception, which is, like, God can do all things logically possible, right? So, and all that I mean by that is that God can't do things which are logically impossible or contradictory, like making a stone so heavy he can't lift, right?
I've heard that argument before. So, when I say all-powerful, do I mean can God make a circle a square?
Right, like, presumably no, right?
No, that is a contradiction within literal reality. It would implode on itself by logical standpoint.
I wasn't making your argument.
Not what I mean
I wasn't making that argument. I was assuming that I was just clarifying what I meant by logically possible. But I assume you do hold to that God can do all things logically possible that aren't contradictory.
I mean, if he created the universe with all of its laws, it is very possible for him to change that law,
but he could have chosen not to create.
To be as a miracle.
He could have chosen to create a different universe or not to create at all, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this is going to be my issue with the whole free will response to the problem of evil. Is God being all knowing, right? When he created this universe, he knew what each agent would freely choose to do. So for every action that I did, he knew I would freely choose to do it, and then it's not going to be for like I'll try to give like a concrete example. So like the last time you sinned, right? The last time you sinned, it was possible that you could have chosen to not sin instead. And since that universe where everything else is the same, but you chose not to sin, that's logically possible. God could have created that universe. So it's not going to take away your free will for him to create that universe where you freely chose not to sin. In the universe he created where you freely chose to sin, you still have free will. And in the universe he created where you freely choose not to sin, you still have free will. Both of those worlds are free of contradictions.
Oh yeah, but here's the thing. Like I said, with the multiverse theory and these big what-ifs, we're going to stick to reality and what we know as
that's not the multiverse theory. That's not what I'm doing.
You said if there was an opposite one where I equally didn't do that sin, right?
No, I'm saying that
attributing to that
when I'm talking
theory.
about possible worlds again, I'm talking about ways that things could have been. I'm not talking about actual like alternative realities that exist, because presumably God could have created different types of realities, right? He wasn't forced to create this one that we see today, right?
I mean, it's very possible he could have, and it's very possible that he couldn't have. It's very possible that there is, or equally isn't.
If you're saying that God...
There's nothing to base upon that what if. I love thinking about these what if things, but that's the thing with what if. There's no basis of some foundation to support that what if. It's just rambling of the mind. It's
it just falls out of what it means to be omnipotent, right? Because you said he can create anything that's logically possible. So if I present a world in which is free of contradictions, under that definition of omnipotence, God could instantiate that world.
How so?
Because that's what it means to be omnipotent. To be able to instantiate a logically possible world. So, like... I'm
a little retarded. Just give me a minute. I'm trying to...
You're good.
Where it's like, are you talking about if he were to create another universe that... What are you getting at? I'm sorry.
So what I'm saying
really
is that when God first created the world, he could choose what type of universe he wants to create. Because when he creates the universe, he's knowing how everything's going to play out, right? He knows every fact about reality. And anything that's not contradictory, he's able to create. That's what it means to be omnipotent. He can create, and when I say instantiate, I just mean create. He can create any world that's not contradictory, that's free of contradictions. So what I'm saying is he created a world in which, like, yesterday you did some sin. You freely chose to do some sin. But what I'm saying is that he could have also created a world in which everything was the same, except for yesterday you freely chose not to sin. That world is also free of contradictions. So an omnipotent God could also create that reality.
And the point...
The point's going to be that he could create a world in which all free agents choose the good, but they still have free will. They all freely choose to do the good. They're not forced to choose it, but every agent freely chooses it. That also plays in that
multiverse theory. You see, you're going with, like, you're saying with every action there will be an opposite action, and now you're making that every opposite action there is a possibility that God created a universe where everyone made that opposite action of doing bad and doing good to make that huge leap from a different timeline.
It's not multiverse, because this is just because I'm not saying that this other universe where everybody chooses the good exists in reality. I'm saying that it's logically possible. I'm saying that it's free from contradictions. There's not like a contradiction in the idea that everybody freely chooses to do good.
All right, I would make a little ground rules here. I've actually talked to many people, and they've done these what if scenarios out of the butt, and a lot of them, it's like, well, I can't answer that because, like, what if this whole conversation was in the Matrix and this was all pointless? Like, it just rambles off from the rationality of the actual.
No, you're misunderstanding. Like, it's gonna fall out. What I'm saying is, like, we can do that. So what if we were all created in a Matrix, right? Is that world free from contradictions? Yes. Well, then if an omnipotent being can create any world that's free of contradictions, then the omnipotent being could create the world we're all in the Matrix, right? Like, that's what it means by omnipotence. If you're saying that we can't talk about that, then, like, we can't do these what ifs, then I'm just going to ask you, what does it even mean to be an omnipotent being if you're saying that it doesn't mean he can create any logically possible world?
I mean, just because he can doesn't mean that he did or didn't.
That's not what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm still lost. Anyway, I feel like we're just going to hit circles, but... do you have another point where it's just like...
Yeah, my point is just that that free will doesn't work as like a type of defense for why evil exists, because God could create the world where we all freely choose to choose him. We all freely choose to follow him, to have a relationship, to love him. We're not forced to do it. We all freely choose to do it. And
that's not free will then. If he pre-made free will for us to all love him, that is literally implementing a program in our heads to all love him, and that contradicts free will of us getting to choose to or not to do something.
I don't think that always freely choosing the good is going to contradict free will. And I can even give an example, right? So, like, God's going to be all good, right? Anything he does is going to be good. But he's also free. He also has free will. He can freely choose what he's going to do. He's not forced to do it, but he's always going to choose the good. He's a maximally good being. So you're going to say God doesn't have free will?
Because his character is good. Because his character is just. And that's why it is shown throughout. And that is why it's reliable to say, yes, he could do bad. He could.
Right.
But that's not in his character what has been shown.
Right, but do you see what
That
you're
is
saying?
why-
Do you see what you're saying is that it's possible for there to be an agent that could do bad but never will?
And that would be the ultimate good then, because the evidence shows there was no bad for him to do it, but yet he could do bad, which makes it even more good that he had the possibility to do it in the first place.
Right, and I'm saying since there's no contradiction in an agent that can do the bad but never does, that God could create a world where that's the case for all agents. That's what I'm saying.
But we're not God.
That's
The
not what
evidence shows that everyone has not been doing good. I kind of see where you're going at. A little, just a little. But it's like
there's big problems with the free will defense.
it's all just what if everyone was good. So do you believe in free will or not? That's the main question I guess I should ask you.
I'm doing an internal critique on like your view, so my position's not really going to play into it. I'm just assuming that free will does exist because I'm like operating under your axioms. If you're just asking in general, like outside of this conversation,
just because of me, like what is your
in general,
what's your stance on it?
In general, outside of this conversation, I lean towards like compatibilism. So I don't think that there's libertarian free will. I don't think that it's actually true that for an action we could do otherwise.
So you're saying that it's basically our environment?
Well,
right?
I think that when we talk about, so when we talk about making a decision, right? We want to say let's say I decide to walk over to my refrigerator right now. Either I decided to do that for reasons or I didn't decide to do that for any reasons. And I think if I decided to do it for reasons, then given that those reasons were present, I had to do that. But if instead it's the other way around, if I didn't do that for reasons, it's just random. I don't think like on either way, that dichotomy, you're getting to free will. It's kind of like a randomness objection against it, where if all physical facts about reality could be identical and you could still choose A or B, then it seems random as to whether it's A or B. It doesn't seem that it's actually you choosing it.
So why do we, as a human race, have an obligation to adhere our own choices through consequences? If that's the truth, what you believe in is that we're just predetermined to do this stuff, why not use that in a court case? Why not be like, hey, Your Honor, I didn't mean to kill those kids. I was just predetermined to do it.
Yeah, because I think
they were not going to buy that, because through everyone's experience through human, we've noticed that there are times that we do good and there are times that we have done evil. You have had those thoughts before.
Right, so
we all have.
Yeah, so
we all have those thoughts, but we choose to act on it or not act on it.
Yeah, so the way that I'm gonna approach this is, like I said, I deny libertarian free will, but I'm a compatibilist. That means that I think that we can make sense of and talk about free will in a different sense. So I would say that free will exists, but I don't mean that you could actually do otherwise. What I mean is that you had a desire or intention to do something, then you did it, then that means you did it freely. So I'm still going to say in a court case, if somebody murdered someone, I don't care whether or not it was like possible for them to do otherwise. What I'm looking at is, did they have a desire and intention to do it, and then they did it. And then I'm saying that's enough to hold them morally culpable.
Because they had free will to act. They could chose not to, but they went through with that evil decision and chose the path to do that evil.
Well, I don't believe that.
So
I don't believe they could have done something else. I just believe they had a desire and intention to do that, and then they did it. And that's all I need for moral culpability. I don't believe that they could have done otherwise.
I feel like that would just be a big excuse for me to do anything in my life at that point and be like, oh, yeah, date rape, I was just predetermined to do it. It was just going to happen anyway. It doesn't matter. I would say no. Whoever did that date rape, I'd say, no, you chose to do that to that young lady and defile her. And that was evil, and you should have not done that.
I mean, yeah.
I don't care if it was you had a rough childhood. There's other people out there that were in the same situation, and they turned their life around.
Yeah, but I'm gonna say,
if you're exposed in the same environment and there's a different outcome, that shows that there's more than human mind than just neurological connection. There's more than just biochemicals.
So I'm just gonna say that, so even if it was determined for you to do it, that doesn't give you the excuse. You had a desire and intention to do it, and then you did it.
Why
and so
not?
I'm gonna hold you morally culpable.
Why not?
Yeah, because that's
Why
just...
not? If there was no choice in the matter, if I had no choice in the matter, if I did not have a free will, we were programmed to do that no matter what. It doesn't matter. You can make excuse. Well, I was growing up in a broken family. That's why I'm abusive. That's why I beat on people and do bar fights. I would just had a bad childhood. I would say no. You can change. You can do good. You don't have to do that just because you were in an environment. Because the next person over grew up in the same environment, and now look, they live a complete opposite life. That just shows with a scientific method, if you repeat something enough, then it's true. But if it's different each time, it shows that there's more to a person than what their environment is, how they grew up, or where they were born, or what culture they were in.
Wait, you're not going to be able to establish libertarian free will with the scientific method through that, because people choosing good and bad things are compatible with determinism or free will. Like, the fact that people sometimes choose good and sometimes choose bad isn't going to be evidence for libertarian free will. So I don't know why you said, like, oh, you can just, like, use the scientific method here, because you can't do that.
All right, fair enough. I'll take that.
Anyways,
but you see where I'm getting at, where it's just like, because, all right, for example, Abraham Lincoln, this guy who assassinated him, right?
Yeah.
John Wilkes Booth. He had a brother. So, John Wilkes Booth's brother, I was about, I believe, 15 years after, when he was at the train station, some dude was about to trip. He wasn't paying attention, about to fall on the tracks, and this dude stops him. It turns out that guy that he saved a life was a cousin of Abraham Lincoln. So literally one person wanted to shoot people. Abraham Lincoln, the president, the other dude saved one. Mm-hmm. And they grew up in the same environment, though. So...
Right, but I'm not saying that it's all environment. I'm saying that what other
external force would that predetermine of your choices be then?
There's no such thing as somebody who grew up in the same environment, had all the same experiences, has all the same genetics, and is being currently affected by all the same physical facts. Because if all those same things were true, then that would just be the same person. It wouldn't be a different person.
Well, that's the point. And then that would just prove that there's more to you than what your environment is.
Yeah, but I don't disagree with that. That's not inconsistent with my position.
So do you agree with that or disagree? Because then if it's not your environment, if it's not where you grew up,
what I'm saying is
then there's
everything.
An external force that has to be changing something.
What I'm saying is, let's look at the world. What I'm saying is this. Let's look at the world up until I'm choosing to murder somebody or not murder somebody. So we have all of the history of the entire universe up to that point, and even including my desires, my intentions, any considerations into the decision I'm making, all of my life history, all of my environment, all of my genetics, everything is fixed in the past. And then you're saying, despite all these things being the exact same, that there can be a world where I either do this action or don't do this action, and all the history, my desires, intentions, my considerations, my genetics, my environment, all these things are fixed in the past, the same, and still two different worlds, two different possibilities come out of that. It just seems random as to which one it's going to be at that point. It doesn't seem like it's a freely chosen action. That's my issue with it.
See, with that, again, that does seem at that point where it's just like that relativist standpoint, where it's just, it still fits into, well, what happens. Ultimately, there is no choices between our matters, even though my experience contradicts that, because we see it every day in our lives through our families and friends, that they sometimes choose to do good things, and other times they choose to do bad things.
Yeah, but and
that's like, oh, it's all relative.
But that's, I just don't feel
even though the whole world, how they determine their culture, every single culture holds value to the choices of people. Yeah, that's what separates us from the animals.
I just don't
feel
like
if we all agree globally that there is choices that we make in our lives, But then if it's relativist, where that there isn't a choice, then why on earth does everyone agree that there is?
Well, I just think that I would just say that people are mistaken, right? And I would also say this. I don't know.
All
I would just
8
say that it
billion
doesn't seem like it's actually true that our personal experiences back up this notion. I think people just think that they do, because if you look at all the choices that we observe people to make, the things they do, they choose to do good things, they choose to do bad things. It seems like if everything you've done you could do otherwise, but all of that is consistent with my position. Like all that could be true and my position could be true, or all that could be true and your position could be true. So I don't see that as like evidence for one of those positions.
So you really don't believe that I could have the choice to either go out and feed somebody, or I can go out and just have to smack them.
I do believe that, but when I say you have a choice, all I mean is a desire and intention. I don't mean you could do otherwise, because I'm a compatibilist.
What does that mean? Like, not compatibilist, but what other choice would there be?
I don't, by choice, I mean something different by that word than what you mean by choice. So when I say choice, what I mean is that you have a desire. If you have a desire and intention to do something, then you chose to do it. I don't mean that you could do otherwise. But when you say choice, you mean that you could actually do otherwise.
I'm still a little lost on that. But so you're saying if I was having a bad day and I just randomly, even though it's out of my character, you're saying there's no way I cannot just smack somebody, even though throughout my life I've never done that through my experience. Are you saying that I cannot go out right now and just smack someone across the face, even though through experience of people that have witnessed me, I've never done it?
Yeah, you could go out and smack someone right now, but
yeah, like I said, I have a choice. That's the free will.
But that's not what I mean by free will, right? Because what I mean is that given all of the same causal history of everything, you can all up to that moment where you slap them, that you could actually either slap them or not slap them. And I can't make sense of that. That just seems to be like it's random as to whether you're going to slap them or not. So it just seems like if all of history up to the point where you walk up to them is fixed, then you're just going to slap them. That's the only outcome.
And then there's no evidence of that.
Well, like I said, it seems to be that I can give you a dichotomy, so I can press you on this a little bit. I can say, for any action you do, you're either doing it for reasons, or it's not the case that you're doing it for reasons. Those are the only two options. It has to be one of those. You're either doing it for reasons, or you're not doing it for reasons.
I've seen people do stuff for absolutely no reason at all.
Well, then it would be random. It's not going to be a free choice if it's just random.
But they chose to. How could, like I said, there's contradictions between those where it's just like, you say you choose to do it, but then you don't mean choose. You mean it was just, you were going to do it regardless. But then, again, it also contradicts what everyone in the world believes and holds dearly to everyone ever.
Maybe, but like, do you think that surely you believe that like most people in the world could be mistaken about something? Like, you think that even if 70% of the worlds are atheists, that 70% of the worlds would be wrong, right? So,
do I believe what I believe 100%? Absolutely not. All right? I have doubt. I sin. That shows that I don't believe in my cause, because I choose to rebel against God, you know? So I don't believe 100%. But there is a good percent that I do believe in it. And to say that someone believes in something 100%, I think is a fool, because there's always that what if. So when it comes to like proof, I've always had this discussion with what's his face? I forgot your name.
Michael?
Yeah, Mike. But so to say, I've heard people always come to me. I might be trailing off a little bit. You can always point that out if I start to go off the tracks.
It's fine.
But,
I'll just bring it back once you're done.
But to prove something is always impossible. The only thing you can prove something, to prove something, meaning it cannot be another way.
Yeah, I disagree.
All right.
Yeah.
Prove to me that this is a real conversation we're having.
So it's no. Okay. So the claim.
No.
Listen, the claim you made was that nothing can be proven. Not that, and I said I disagree with the claim that nothing can be proven. I didn't say I think anything can be proven, right? You see how those are two different claims, right?
to prove something literally by definition means
Okay,
it cannot be another way. You can take any route for anything
so my mind
that is present
exists.
at the table.
Yeah, my mind exists because if my mind doesn't exist, it's a contradiction.
So with that, like I've heard that example before. So I have never seen your mind. I have never touched your mind. I've never interacted or done anything like that with your mind. So you can't prove to me that your mind exists.
Well,
But
I can prove it. I can't prove it to you, but I can prove it.
You can't like take your head off and be like, hey, this is my brain. And I can always be like, well, it could be in the Matrix. This could be all a dream and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, people do that all the time. That the what ifs go way off. So, but is there evidence that your mind is there? Because how you articulate, how you present yourself, how you function. Yeah, there's a lot of evidence to support that you have a brain. But to prove it, it's like someone could always make that excuse. I'd be like, well, it could be this, or it could be this. And so
this is the thing, though, is we're gonna share a set of assumptions about the world. Like, right, we're both gonna share a belief that the external world is real. We're probably gonna share a belief in the laws of logic. We're probably gonna share a belief in the axioms of mathematics. We're probably gonna share tons of belief, right?
Don't even go with the math. I'm just gonna die.
And so what we could do is, like, if I take a set of things that you believe and then I make a deductive argument from those things that you believe to some conclusion, then, like, I can actually prove that to you, right?
That's still not proof. It's evidence. It's definitely evidence to support that, but to prove it, again, by definition, means it cannot be another way. So like math. I think math is a good way to prove. You know, right. Because 2 + 2 = 4. You can prove 2 + 2 = 4.
So
it doesn't equal 5. It doesn't equal 6. So I do admit that, like, hey, anything, I think either math or like the repeatability of a scientific method is a good way to prove it, or ish.
So how about this? Extent. How about this? If you already hold the belief, let's say we have a mutual friend, John, and he's not married, and we both agree that he's not married, and I say, okay, so I'll say, like, a bachelor is an unmarried man, right? John is an unmarried man, and then therefore John is a bachelor. This is going to be logically valid. It follows one of the logical forms. I don't have to get into that. But if you agree with me that John is unmarried, so you agree with both premises of the argument, then the conclusion is going to be proven to you.
And again, the what-if scenario could be like, well, what if John doesn't exist? What if he's just a figment of our imagination?
I said if you agreed with me on both the premises. I said if you agreed with me on both the premises, then it would be proven to you, right? If you agree that the bachelor is an unmarried male, and you agree that John is unmarried, if you agree with both of those things, then you're also, once I give you the argument, you're also going to believe that John is a bachelor.
I mean, he could be deceiving us. Like, that's not proof that John is unmarried by that statement.
It is. So this is if you already hold the belief, right? If you already hold the belief that John is unmarried, and you already hold the belief that a bachelor is an unmarried male, then you're going to conclude that John is a bachelor. It logically follows. It's just modus ponens. P implies Q, P therefore Q.
I'm still just going to go by the definition of proof, that it cannot be another way.
That's the definition of a deductive proof.
You can create similarities of words that mean together to apply to a situation, just because, you know, our language, that's how we use our language. But that doesn't mean in that situation that John is 100% an unmarried man. That doesn't prove that he is, because the word, you know, adheres to that sentence, and it makes that connection. Because we both agree on it doesn't mean it's 100% true.
Okay, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I can rationally compel you to believe something. That's what I'm saying by proof, is that if you already believe the premises, then the conclusion, you would have to accept the conclusion. If the conclusion logically follows and you already accept the premises, then you have to accept the conclusion. That's what I'm saying.
I will say this, though. We are getting a little off track of, like, just determining how English speech, and anyway, let's go back to, like, the philosophy of what we believe.
Okay, so let's rein it back a little bit to basically, there's a further problem with the free will thing, and that has to be libertarian free will and omniscience are incompatible with each other. And a lot of people have an issue when I say this, but I don't want to give you like a formal argument because I don't know how deep into like philosophy and stuff you are, so I'll just give you like an example. So let's say I'm walking up to a crossroads, and God, being all-knowing, knows that I'm going to go left at the crossroads. Is it possible that I can go right, despite God knowing that I'm going to go left?
To that, I will honestly answer, I do not know. Because it doesn't talk about it. There's no evidence of saying this could happen, or what if this happens, and
so then it seems like you're going to be agnostic on
God,
libertarian free will then. You don't actually know if we have libertarian free will.
Can I finish, please?
Yeah, go ahead. I was just pointing out the entailment there.
So, if God already knows, then that would be a contradiction within what you just said, and it would contradict each other, because there is a possibility that you could go right, but you would already know that you would go right. It could be, we don't know what the logical layers of this implications are, because it could be where it's like, oh, what was already predetermined was already written in black and white. No matter what we do, it's always a straight line. Or he could already know all the different choices we could have made throughout life, like a freaking branching tree, and just literally knows all, but is more likely to know what is going to happen due to literally him being God.
Yeah, the issue with the branching tree thing.
Different ways you can approach it, but this is an area of expertise where I do not know, because guess what? I'm not God.
No, so yeah,
isn't, so I can explain something that I'm not even a part of, the impotence, you know what I mean? So with that, it's like, yeah, I will admit, I'm not going to make up some farce story to get you to whatever. I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not asking you to be God. What I'm pointing out is that there's going to be two propositions that you believe. One is that libertarian free will is true, which is for any acts that you do, you could do otherwise. Then the other proposition that you believe is going to be God knows the truth of all future propositions. That's going to be what it means to be all-knowing. You know, for any future proposition, like John will go to the store on Tuesday, September 27th, right? God knows if that's true or false. That's just what it means to be omniscient. So what I'm pointing out is that starting from those two propositions, we can derive a contradiction, which is going to mean that both of those propositions cannot actually be true at the same time.
I've heard that argument before, where it's like, if it was true free will, we would be able to do all choices, whether God's doing it or not. And if he already knows something was predetermined to happen, then it's not really truly free will. I've heard that before.
And the issue with I'll just quickly touch on the branching one, and then we can switch gears, and you can question me if you want.
Just speculation of my own accord. There is nothing that anywhere says that, or reference, or nothing. That's just something that I spotted out, and I'm not going to mark it as true fact,
Yeah, so I just wanted to quick touch on it, is that if the branching view is true, then what I would want to know is like, okay, fine. So God knows that if I choose to go right at the crossroads, this happens. If I choose to go left at the crossroads, this happens. But this skirts around the issue of whether or not God actually knows whether I'll go left or right. And then as long as God actually knows whether I'll go left or right, then the same problem is going to crop up. So it doesn't seem like it actually solves the problem, as long as God still knows if I'm going to go left or right. But we can switch gears if you want to ask me some questions. Like, that was mostly all the things I wanted to ask about.
Also, I appreciate you talking to me.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So, I'm trying to feed my tarantula right now. Oh, screw that. She's jumpy.
You have a pet tarantula?
I have 7.
Jeez.
Right. So, there we go. I'm pretty sure since do believe you've heard of the evidence to support why God exists, counter evidence of why God couldn't exist, and what are the implications between the two?
Yeah, I know I know like most of the classic arguments. There's like the Kalam cosmological argument, the fine-tuning argument, the contingency arguments from design, arguments from transcendental arguments from morality. There's a whole ontological arguments. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with most of them.
Yeah, the morality one's a big one because I always say, especially when it comes to agnosticism, I hope I pronounced that right, is like you're taking that middle road, right? You're taking the middle ground. But the thing is, in reality, you don't do that. You don't apply that to your life.
Well, I disagree, but continue.
Because when you take a test, it's either true or false. It's either A or it's non-A.
Yes,
it's either
I agree with that.
or that.
Yes, I agree.
And if you don't, so if you be like, well, I like them both. Guess what? Failed.
Yeah, but
you failed that answer.
Yeah. So this is the distinction, right? So for a true or false question, yes, either the question is actually true or it is actually false. One of those is going to be the case, and I don't disagree with that. I agree with you. Either it's true God exists or it's false God exists.
I'll admit there's a chance that I'm wrong.
I agree with you. Yeah, but I agree with you that it's one of those two things and that there's not a third option there. But I'm talking about something different. My position's one in respect to my beliefs. So it's my commitment to the proposition that God exists or doesn't exist, and I'm saying I don't know if it's true or false. So like in that example of the true or false question on the test, I'm going to agree with you that yes, there's a fact of the matter. Either the question is true or false, but all I'm saying is I'm not sure which of those it is. Like there's a little bit of a difference there.
Okay, because I'm wondering if you're just in the leniency of, because I've met a few. I mean, I have a lot of respect, but they also don't even look into it. And they try to live out their whole lives like that. And I'm big
into philosophy of religion, so I definitely don't do that.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, when people believe in something, we all believe in something, what reality is, what our own truth claims are of what we perceive to be reality, right? And in order to establish your belief, apply what you believe into your own life. And I've seen a lot of people lack that. Because I do that. I try to follow what I believe. Yeah. And with an atheist, they cannot live out atheism.
Sure they can.
I'll explain. Okay. So with the point of morality, right? You've heard that before, I'm sure, that if God doesn't exist, there is no objective good and evil. There is no right and wrong. It's the predetermined of whose opinion, so it's like your definition of good is different from mine, just like the next guy and the next guy. So it's like, who makes the definition if it's just all of a matter of opinion? Is it a small group? Is it a country? Which country? You know what I'm saying? If there is no mind prior to the human mind to create these ideas of good and evil, then who makes up what is good and evil? It's just, at that point, it's just a taste. Like, do you prefer broccoli or do you prefer asparagus? There's no ultimate right answer to that. It's just a matter of opinion. So, and I'm saying, live that out, where if you believe that's what reality is, when you see someone, if you get stolen from, and you go up to them and you're like, you should have not done that. Should have not done that. You should say, well, in my perspective, that was wrong. But I see that you need that money more than I do, so it's okay. In your opinion, that was right. I'm not right, you're not wrong, I'm not wrong, you're not right. It's ultimately doesn't matter. They don't adhere what they believe into their lives. They act as if there is a value of right and wrong. It is wrong to beat an innocent child. It is wrong to date rape somebody. It is wrong to murder somebody. It is wrong to be racist. But they don't live out their belief. They don't apply that belief to their own lives. And that's why I say they don't live it out. They don't live out true atheism. Okay. Because true atheism is, it's going to be a little harsh, but true atheism is despair. So, because, go ahead. I talked for a while.
There's like 2 or 3 different arguments in there that I kind of want to address. The first one is, so basically, like, well, I'll talk, so do you think that, like, so you can either, like, this is something that a lot of people say. So a lot of people say, like, either atheists can either theists can live out theists can live out their worldview, like they can act in accordance with what they believe. Atheists can act in accordance with what they believe. So like theists can live their life as if there's a god. Atheists can live their life as if there's no god, but like you can't live your life as an agnostic. Some people will say that. I don't know if you believe that or not.
Well, when you say cannot, I've met a few people that took really offense to it. Like, why not? Why can't I do that? I'm just saying because you don't live your life.
Yeah,
I'm saying what you believe, you're not applying it. So you're acting like you believe this, but you don't believe it so much to apply it to your own life.
Yeah. So
and like it contradicts your experience. And it's like, for me, if I had experience that contradicted my belief, I would definitely really evaluate myself.
Yeah, so I think that you can actually like live life as an agnostic. I think that you can live your life in accordance with the idea that you don't know, but are truly seeking to know whether or not a God exists or not. Like you can actually read a lot of philosophy, read different religious texts, totally do conditional prayer. You can pray like, if God, if you exist, show me something if you exist. I think all these things are going to be consistent with like living an agnostic lifestyle. Would you disagree with that?
Oh, so with the say, hey God, prove to me you exist. That is very arrogant for someone to do that. Like it's like going up to, if you had a girlfriend and you're like, you know what? If you love me, then you got to have sex with me. Otherwise, if you don't, you do not love me.
No, it's more like saying if you love me, you need to talk to me. That's different than have sex with me.
Yeah. Not really. If you're saying, hey, do this or I'm not going to believe, that is so manipulative.
That's not what they're saying.
That is not a way to build a relationship with something.
Look, they're not saying do this or else I'm not going to believe in you. They're just saying like, look, God, like, I don't know if you exist or not. I'd like to know if you do. If you want to show me that you exist, I'm open to it. Like, that's not arrogant. That's just called seeking.
That's another thing. The restraint of God is really amazing. Like, he knows that you have a free will, and he knows that if he were to interact, depending on how stubborn the person is, they're going to believe in them. Because that also, contradicts your free will. Because now he's forcing himself into your life, like, hey, look, worship me. You know what I mean? So that also would contradict the whole point of him giving us a free will. In order for us to build a relationship, what I did was I opened myself up. I literally was like, all right, I'm going to look at this evidence. I'm going to say, hey, there's a possibility. It might not happen right away. It didn't for me. It really did not. It took months. Actually, it took over about 8 months. It was about 8 months later, I had an experience where he literally, it's up to your interpretation, but for me, from my experience, not showed himself, but I felt that presence.
Look,
and that felt...
we're getting like really off track because the claim,
we're going into experience instead of
the claim that I'm making is not that God would that if God existed he would reveal himself to you, and the claim I'm making is not whether or not it would be arrogant for you to ask him to reveal himself to you. The claim I'm making is that it is possible to live a lifestyle consistent with agnosticism, with the idea that you don't know if God exists or not. And all I'm saying is that conditional prayer like if God, like, if you exist, show me something I would like to know, and also seeking, reading the Bible, reading religious texts, reading philosophy, that's going to be, like, consistent with agnostic values. The only claim I'm making is that it's possible to live in a lifestyle that's, like, in accordance with agnosticism.
All right. I see what you're saying. So, with that, all right, I'm going to do a little thing here. Hi, my name is Brennan. What's your name?
Michael.
Josh?
What?
Is it Josh?
Michael?
Oh, Trevor.
Yeah, Michael.
See, what I'm doing is not only am I being extremely rude, I'm also being very arrogant, and I'm saying, I think I know you better than you know yourself. So in order for you to have a relationship, to build a relationship with you, I need to know about you, and you need to approach me on your own accord, and really reveal yourself to me, and then we can be friends and have a decent relationship.
Yeah, so that's not what I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that
Oh.
the only way in which you're going to believe is if God says something to you, because you're also looking for arguments on either side, looking for evidence on either side, reading different religious texts. I'm just saying that this is one avenue, because if you're truly seeking, you're going to look at all avenues, right? So all I'm saying is that a lifestyle consistent with agnosticism is going to be one in which you're like actually seeking to find the truth, because you don't currently know the truth and you'd like to know the truth. All I'm saying is that I don't think it's true when people say that you can live a life as if God doesn't exist, and you can live a life as if God does exist, but you can't live a life as if you don't know if God exists, because I think you can live a life as if you don't know God exists.
Oh, you can. I'm not saying like you're just going to blop dead and, if you don't. But it's like, if you're seeking, and that's smart, I appreciate that is being intellectually honest with yourself, where you're like, hey, I'm going to look at these religions, I'm going to do a compare and contrast, and then I want to come to my own conclusion. That's the smart thing to do. That is a very smart thing. And I wish a lot of people would think just like you, sir, Michael.
Yeah. Okay, the second thing was the moral thing. I wanted to get to that because you brought it up, and I'm not the type to run away from points, so I want to address that. So, you said
just a heads up, I do have to get off in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. I can just like quickly give my response, and then if you want to say last thing before we go, that's cool with me. So the response to the idea that atheists, so for one, there's so many issues and I don't know where to get into with the moral argument. It's one of my least favorite arguments, if I'm being honest with you. So like the argument goes like this. So if God exists, it goes, if objective moral facts exist, then God exists. Objective moral facts do exist, therefore God exists. That's how the classic moral argument for God goes. My issue is that premise one's not clear. It's not clear that you need to have God for objective moral facts. Like there could be like moral Platonism, where there's like actually a abstract object of the good or the bad that exists independent of us. That could be true. I'm not convinced of it. And then also the second premise, that objective moral facts do exist, that's dubious. I'm myself not convinced that objective moral facts do in fact exist. And then as your point, that atheists will live their life as if they do believe that objective moral facts exist. And then the reason you gave is because when someone like essay or like sexually assaults someone, they'll say like that's bad. And what you're saying is that if that person who's sexually assaulting them like wants to, then like when the atheist tells them that that's bad, that doesn't actually mean anything. Like they're actually trying to invoke an objective moral fact that they don't really believe exists. I just disagree with that. I think that them telling the person who sexually assaults someone that what they're doing is bad is consistent with moral anti-realism. Like, because moral anti-realism just says that moral truths are mind dependent. So when I say that like sexually assaulting someone's bad, I'm saying I take a stance against this. I think it ought not happen. And then all that I'm saying when I'm telling somebody that it's wrong, I'm not referencing like an objective moral truth. I'm just saying I take a stance against this. You shouldn't do this just means like I take a stance against this. So I don't think that them saying that commits them to accepting objective moral facts exist.
Right. But if you got to understand, in order for an objective moral, that means there needs to be something prior to the human mind that defines the right and wrong.
Yeah, so like, what about a platonic object?
What about it?
Like, if there's just an abstract object that exists independent of humans, and then like that universal will just be in certain things, and those are good things, and then things that it's not in are bad things. Like, there's ways to account for it.
So he's saying that there was like no humans existed, nothing else in the universe. There was just one random object just floating around.
Well,
then
it's
would there
an
be
abstract,
objective morals or not?
It's an abstract object, so it's going to be like something that's non-physical, non-material. Kind of like it'd be a universal. So like the color red. So like there's certain objects that get the property of redness, and so we call that a universal. But it's not something that exists. It's not something that exists in the material world. Like, you can't find me red and bring it. You can bring me something that is red, but you can't find me red and bring it. It's just an abstract object. It's something that exists, but it exists immaterially. And I'm saying that why couldn't good and bad be the same sort of way?
Why can't good and bad be a color?
Can't exist with the same type of ontology as a color, or
Because we understand why colors are colors, and it's not abstract. It's just the refract. Literally, red is every color but the red, because it's refracting that one beam of light. The red, violet light is shooting out, and that's why we perceive that color, because it's literally every other color is going into it.
you can use you can use any type of property about something. You can even look at numbers. Numbers are going to be abstract objects. Like, it doesn't have to be colors. Like,
Even though we created,
you can't bring me the number 1. You can't point me to where the number 1 is in the universe, but that doesn't mean it's not real.
But if we're talking about right and wrong, that's not an abstract concept that we help understand our cosmic universe to help break it down to the simplest of, equations and stuff, to help understand how everything works. It is literally a philosophical statement. It's not abstract.
I haven't seen I just haven't seen any argument that's ruled it out as an abstract object. Like, you're just saying that it's not, but I don't see any reason why that couldn't be the case.
Because if there is or isn't a God, there either is or isn't good and evil ultimately. That's right. Just it. It's not abstract, because if there is a God, there is I still have, I got a minute. There is a being who defines right and wrong, but because his character is good and just, it is obvious that would adhere to the universe of what is good.
Yeah, and I'm saying we can account for that without the God. We don't need the God to account for that there's going to be alternative methods.
But then there's that argument, who defines the right and wrong?
Yeah, I just told you, like, it's just going to be, it could just be like a necessarily existent abstract object.
You said,
wait, why does it need to be a who? Wait, what's the argument that it has to be a who? I don't see why that would be true.
Because if there's no mind, if there is no God, and there's none of us to create good and bad, then it's not there anymore. Because there's no God.
I don't accept that premise that you need a mind to have good or bad. What's the argument for that?
If no one existed, there was no God and nothing, then good and bad wouldn't exist either.
Well,
because there'd be no reason to start it from happening, no mind to find the rationalize of what is good or bad, because there's nothing.
So not under the theory I'm putting forward. That wouldn't be true.
Explain.
Yes, if good or bad are an abstract object, you're not going to need a mind. There could be no God, no people, nothing, and those abstract objects of good and bad, just like 1 and 2, or red and blue, all these abstract things are still going to exist, regardless of whether or not there's any minds.
This kind of sounds like the argument of, like, what came first, the chicken or egg, and it's just like, well, it's just a paradox.
Yeah, but, like, I just don't see... I've never seen any theist give me an argument for why, like, a mind is going to be necessary to have, like, objective moral facts. Like, they just do what you're doing right now and just say, like, it's just true. If there wasn't a mind, where would it be? How would it be there? Like, but give no argument for why.
Because if we have a rational mind to process, right, to make things up of our surroundings, and we determine this is a good thing or this is a bad thing. If our minds didn't exist, if no one's mind exists, then there's nothing to determine what that is in the first place. There's no mind. There's nothing to do that if there is no God. There's no external, you see, it just completely implodes on that logic.
Yeah, the theory I'm putting forward is I'm saying that, like, it could just be something that actually exists and,
you're saying, like, it could be, couldn't be this.
Yeah, but again, because your claim is that without no evidence. Yeah, your claim is that if God didn't exist, then a mind, or if God didn't exist, then objective moral facts couldn't exist. So it doesn't matter if I have evidence for this theory or not. All that I'm doing is saying that that's not true, that there's ways that morality could be accounted for without a God or any minds existing. Because I don't even believe that theory. I just don't believe that objective moral facts exist. But I'm just telling you that there are ways to account for it without a God. You don't need a God to have objective moral facts.
I mean, sir, like I said, this is like a little mind game, it feels like, where it's just like, oh, what if it is this? What if it's an abstract? They kind of back someone into an intellectual corner where they can't really get out of.
Well,
that's being dishonest with that conversation, going into that area.
Well, look, it's not being dishonest because the claim that you're making is that it's necessary. That it's necessary, right? If moral facts exist, then God exists. it's necessitated. That's the claim that you want to make, is that if moral facts exist, then necessarily God exists. So it's not like being dishonest or backing you into a corner, because if you can account for objective moral facts without God, the statement that if objective moral facts exist, then necessarily God exists is just going to be false.
Again, that goes into the corner argument where it's just like, if there is no intellectual mind to make up what is happening around them, then there's nothing there to determine, because there's no mind to make it in the first place.
Do you think that if there's no minds, there can't be one of something or two of something?
There's nothing to it. If it's a philosophical point, I'm not saying stuff just doesn't not exist. Like if all minds disappear, doesn't mean grass doesn't start being grass. I'm saying when it comes to the philosophical thinkings of like deep thought of stuff, I'm not saying like equations or math would just stop working because there's no minds to make it, because that's just a lot of the universe, you know. But if it's a moral, there's definitions of things that we create. There's definitions of these words that we're speaking. Yeah. That's how we understand each other.
When you're saying that
there's no mind to create in the first place, it wouldn't exist in the first place. Just like our language, if none of us existed and God didn't exist, and what we're speaking right now wouldn't exist, it wouldn't be whatever you said earlier, that it was just I forgot what it was. But it's just like there would be no one to create in the first place, so it would be nothing. It just nothing's there.
Yeah, it just sounds like you're appealing to like that minds are necessary for morality, which that's not even going to be objective moral facts. That's going to be subjective moral facts. They're just dependent on God's mind. That's just going to be subjective. That's not even like objective.
Anyway, I really do have to go. But we can do this again if you want.
Yeah, I'm down. It was not a bad conversation. It was fun.
But I do want to like understand what you're saying. I'll probably look into it a little bit more of what, because I'll be honest, I'm like really dumb where it comes to like these big words. I've heard you and I'm like, oh shoot, what does that mean? That's but
that's my bad.
I appreciate you so much, you know.
I probably should have tried to simplify it a little bit. It's just sometimes hard for me to think of like alternative words to use.
Really? You can't think of easier words to say?
Well, when it gets deep into like the philosophical discussions and you want to put like certain ideas into words and be precise with your language, it gets kind of challenging.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll let you guys know when the next time. I really gotta go.
All right, have a good one.
All right, you too.
Yep, bye.
Jeez.